You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross this time-space continuum to a place that I call the X-Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X-Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and our worldwide affiliates, radio stations, internet repeat stations, and satellite programming facilities. Worldwide toll-free 800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And our main website where you can listen to the X-Zone 724-365, including the live show, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour, you can hear him ferociously typing in the background, is none other than... He's done now. Is the one and only Michael Horn, who is the authorized American media representative for the Billy Meyer Contacts. His website is theyfly.com. And Mike, always great having you with us. How are you, my friend?
Well, I'm doing fine, Rob. Thank you very much. As I told you right before the show, I just literally walked in the door from a round trip to Phoenix, which is about 140 miles from where I live. So a little trip there.
Yeah. Mike, I'd like to talk to you tonight about the Billy Meyer prophecies. Sure. Like you and I have talked about this before, but the more I watch what's happening in the news, the more I remember what you and I have been talking about based on Billy's prophecies. And there's an organization out there, or lack of organization, who is doing everything it can to try to discredit what Billy is doing. And I'm not going to give them any publicity. I'm not going to mention their name. I'm not going to mention their website. But you've got Billy, who I don't know. I can't see any nefarious reasoning behind what he's doing besides to help mankind. And if that's nefarious, my God, this world is in a worse shape than I ever thought it was.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet he's warned us about what is happening and what is going to happen.
Yep.
And Mike, how do you deal with this, my friend? Like, you and I go back nearly 20 some odd years, and you have never wavered. You have never, ever doubted. And the more I talk to you and the more I read, the more I understand why you have never doubted or wavered, because whatever Billy says comes true.
Well, pretty much anything that we can really test, did he miss or did he hit with something? Mm-hmm. He hit. And this, of course, goes back to the 1950s. This isn't something he's just started doing. I do want to make a comment, if it's okay, about how these, when people try to tear him down and claim that he backdated his prophecies and all this stuff. I thought about this on the drive back up here, and I had a moment of frustration where I had to just say to myself, how do people get that stupid? How do they really go back, regress in thinking so badly? And I owe an explanation on that. And it's like this. You see, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rob.
No, I didn't say anything, buddy. I'm just listening. I was snickering. That's all.
Oh, okay. Well, here's the deal. If Billy Meyer had published 1, 2, 5, 10 specific things that happened to be correct, and if he had put them out as a one-liner prophecy, and we could show that really, well, he backdated that. You see, He only claims that he published it earlier, and this is where the people who try to do that are so preposterous, because what Meyer, we have to set the scene here. And I think we should set the scene this way and say, look, obviously, if and when humanity can confirm and corroborate the existence of extraterrestrial life, intelligent extraterrestrial life, that will be hands down the most important story, the most important discovery in all of human history. And that would be exceeded only by proven contact with these extraterrestrial life forms. Now, it's so staggering in this case because all of it is unprecedented. In other words, when the same people that claim that Meyer backdated his prophetic information, I'm sorry, I have to laugh about it. I'm glad I can laugh after 36 years of research. Here's the deal. They are the same people that claim that Meyer hoaxed his photographs. Now, if you go online, if anybody goes online and searches for hoaxed photographs, you don't have to put in UFO, hoaxed photographs, or most famous or best photographic hoaxes, you're going to find a few sites here and there, not too many actually. Mm-hmm. And they'll show maybe 10 or 15, let's say, perhaps, examples of hoax photographs. And generally what you're seeing is if there's 10 or 15 examples, there's 10 or 15 different photographers.
Yeah.
And they have one photograph. I mean, maybe you can find somebody that hoaxed a couple to a few. Now, you come to Meyer, who beginning in 1964 actually showed 80 UFO photos in 1964 to a highly credible reporter for an either equally or more credible Indian newspaper. And I'm doing this roundabout answer because people these days actually, in some sense through no fault of their own, have no reference point for certain aspects of what we have to simply call reality. Mm-hmm. Rob, everybody's focusing their attention and their reference points are all about, well, the digital age and the things that we can search for, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, this type of thing. Now, the problem with that is that in this digital age, we do not take into consideration or take stock of the idea that life existed before the digital age, when things that a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old child can do today in minutes would actually take an adult or a group of adult days, months, or years to do in the pre-computer age. Now, I mentioned, a reporter for an Indian paper. So this paper was called The Statesman. Mm-hmm. It happens to have been an offshoot of a paper founded in 1818, which was called the Friend of India paper. Founded in 1818, and then the Statesman was this, offshoot of it. It started to be published in 1875 in Calcutta. 1875. It's still published today. 140 years later, it's still published today. So there was a journalist. He went by the name S. Venkatesh or Venkatesh, however they would pronounce it, being true to Indian dialects. He was a highly, highly respected and regarded. He wasn't a tabloid journalist. He was the former special representative of the paper. And when I say former, that's only because he died about 6 years ago. But up until that time, he was highly regarded. Let's just build a little bit of a reference point here.
Sounds great.
When we start talking about prophecies, predictions, photographs, etc. This man wrote an article in 1964. He wrote that article because he interviewed the flying saucer man, so to speak, Billy Meyer. He interviewed Meyer in 1964 in the greater New Delhi area. Mm-hmm. And he wrote about seeing 80 photographs of UFOs. He even went into some detail describing those photographs, including one of the most remarkable photographs you'll ever see, which is a photograph of Meyer sitting cross-legged on the ground, 1964, in front of some spires from an ashram, where he was studying Buddhism. And above his head, floating in the clouds, is a cross. Not a painting of a cross, not a drawing of a cross, not a special effect of a cross, because the photograph was taken with a 1940s Kodak Bellows style camera, which was just the worst thing to even think you could possibly pull off any kind of a special effect with. My father had one of those cameras. I remember you had to roll this little thing out, and then everybody holds still. Yeah. I mean, primitive. Okay, so you've got this camera, and here is this cross in the sky that clearly has not been any kind of a special effect. And what we learned from the Meyer material, now we don't have to believe this, but this is what's stated, is that this is a hologram that the extraterrestrial woman Asket projected into the sky above Meyer's head. It's right in there with all these UFO photos. Now, of the 80 photos that Meyer had at the time, about 11, I think, still remain. And this is one of them, as there are a number of other of the UFO photos from the Indian experience. Now, remember, the people that claim Meyer hoaxed his prophecies are the same people that claim he hoaxed his UFO photos. To this day, no one will be able to duplicate, because no one has been able to duplicate, the Indian photos, certainly not the cross in the sky, and certainly not using a 1940s Kodak camera.
Exactly.
Now, this then proceeds to the more recent photographs of Meyer's, which were taken in the 1970s up to the early 1980s. 81, I think, was the last date. And there's some pretty remarkable photographs there. The photographs, with the exception of the wedding cake craft, which we'll get to, and the energy ships, the classic, what do you call it? The classic disc-shaped craft that Meyer was photographing, these were the ones that were analyzed by independent experts, including from NASA, JPL, et cetera, back in the early 1980s, perhaps, late 70s, early 80s. They were authenticated. They were deemed to be not hoaxes. They were no models. There were certainly no special effects. And what's extremely important about this, and which will become even more important in a moment, is that the analyses done on Meyer's original photos were done with state-of-the-art equipment, which included all sorts of computers and densitometers and spectrographs and stuff that were, at the time, enormously expensive, big, luggy, kind of equipment. Meyer, living up in the boonies in Switzerland on a hilltop, the one-armed guy taking these photos and films and video, he didn't have a state-of-the-art technologies that some of which cost in the tens or more thousands of dollars. Now, it gets even more interesting because that was the technology that authenticated his first photos and films. Now we move to these unusual craft known as the wedding cake, UFO, and the energy ships. And just last year, independent analysis was done on those.
Right.
They didn't need, they didn't need to get a room full of computers. Mm-hmm. They got online, they accessed state-of-the-art technologies, everything from Photoshop on up for 3D imaging and modeling and all this stuff. They used Google Earth for getting shots of the property and getting accurate estimations of the dimensions of the land and what the craft would have. It's a 74-page report that is on the wedding cake UFO. It's very compelling. Now, here's the beauty of it. While Meyer didn't have state-of-the-art, Philip the Room equipment that authenticated his photographs decades ago. He certainly didn't have digital equipment that he could use to either fake or play around with any photographs, and which is accessible and available to anybody today who's interested enough to get it. Most people can get Photoshop. And so a child today literally can take one of Meyer's photos, a 35 millimeter film photo right off the internet, drop it in Photoshop, play with the brightness and contrast, and he will find that instead of it being just a gold object against a black background, it is a large, real craft, an object hovering over a gravel road next to a grassy hillside, et cetera, et cetera. If people who are sincere in their search for the truth cannot grasp this, then, it's best that we don't disturb them. You move on to this next level, which I call the higher standard of proof, because a lot of people are still going to sit there with their thumbs in their mouth going, "No, it can't be." Well, it is, and you can do it if you just open up Photoshop. So Meyer, when he would publish his information, he had conversations with. Am I talking too much in one flow?
No, you're doing fine, Mike.
Okay, so he would have these conversations with these extraterrestrials. If you want me to say once, I'll say alleged extraterrestrials. And starting with the first conversations with Semyaze, which was his third contact person, he was transcribing them shortly after he would have the contact. And that meant he would go back home, because most of the time they dragged him out into the boonies so that people wouldn't be able to follow him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he would get back home an hour or two or whatever later, and within a reasonable period of time, he would sit down at his typewriter. Now, a lot of people don't know what a typewriter is. I mean, I know, but a lot of people don't. You know what a typewriter is.
I sure do. Yeah.
Okay. For the under 25 generation or whatever, it's a computer keyboard with a bunch of silly stuff that you stick a piece of paper in. And you don't get to do delete. You have to erase and go back, whatever. But Meyer was trained since childhood to be able to telepathically receive several million symbol images, each one of which conveyed a distinct idea or concept, phrase, what have you. He could and did and still does sit at his typewriter, which is now a computer, and it's now a Mac. He sits at the computer keyboard. Since the Plejaren record all the conversations with him,
right,
what happens is that they have a device that converts the German language into these symbol pictures to make it more difficult. They could have just done it all in German. And they broadcast it telepathically. They send it to Meyer in a flowing stream that he, at speeds up to 100 words per minute with one hand in German, where every noun is capitalized, transcribes while he is simultaneously translating the symbol picture back into German. We have video of this, in a couple of our films we show it. It's amazing. Guy's sitting there, his hands flying across the keyboard. Now, there are, in a process like this, while he is amazing at doing this, he's a human being, and he occasionally makes mistakes. And it can be because certain ideas or concepts, whatever, could be similar or close, that he could write down the wrong word here or there. He's a human being. So what happens generally is, after he, types all this out and they print it out, it is put on the table in the kitchen for some people to look through. Basically, they sign off on it, that they saw it at such and such a time. And depending on how much work people have to do and all the rest of that, sometimes they'll start going over the translation, looking for any possible errors or omissions or what have you. Sometimes they slip by. Sometimes they get them all, depending. Okay. Each of these conversations with the Plejaren, which sometimes include not just Meyer and one other person, but up to maybe 3 other people, These are then in these contact reports numbered sequentially. And then Meyer puts them out. So now as we start to come to the prophetic information, for those who haven't yet availed themselves of reading some of this stuff for free, online for free, when you do, you're going to realize that the conversation starts in a given place, and then they talk about different things. And in these conversations, very often there's scientific information discussed matter-of-factly, or they point out to Meyer they want him to know something. And that's part of what I call the prophetically accurate information that we've searched out. So what happens in those cases is he's discussing in an interactive, a dialogue with people. This is, to come back to almost the very first thing I said, this isn't somebody who says, I predict such and such on this, will happen.
Right.
And I predict such and such. No, these are actual conversations, dialogues that are conducted between people in a natural conversational manner. There's some stops and starts. Sometimes people do finish. Sometimes somebody interrupts, whatever. But you've got this whole thing. Now, we step aside before we go to talking about the specific documents in which he does write out predictions and how he does it. We would have to believe now that Meyer has gone, and we now have translations up to 600 and some. Not all of them have been translated, but up to number 616 or 22, something like that. Multi-page, for the most part, transcripts where Meyer is in conversation with these people. Some of the conversations are painfully boring, which only lends more credibility because they're talking about things that are very mundane in Meyer's life, pertaining to the difficulties of his either getting something done with the group that he's working with, or fixing something around their property, or why they are on such small margins with their money. So it's kind of like real life stuff. Now, here's the thing that it would take an intelligent person to consider, which rules out the skeptics, obviously. When you've got a man who, with one hand and everything else that's gone on in his life, verifiably documented after years and decades of examination, investigation, research, writes out and publishes this stuff and doesn't even run around screaming about it. He doesn't come and draw attention. He doesn't go say, see what I just wrote, how true it is. He publishes it, and then people have to find it themselves if they're interested. That's what happened for me. That's what happened with other people. Now, those of us who found that material long ago and who got interested enough have been helping to disseminate it. But still, there's millions of people in the world that don't know anything about it. Of course, billions of people, really. But we found it, and we kept digging into it because in reading through these transcripts, and, we can get into some of the particulars, but people have to have a context for this.
Yeah.
Certain things would jump out at me. Some things didn't jump out at me until years later. And that's what actually got me to dig deeper and to know that this was something quite remarkable. And I'll be quite specific. I obtained in 1986 the first 1,800 pages of Meyer's transcripts of the contact notes, contact reports, however you call them. These were these conversations from about January 28th, 1975 till sometime in 1978. And of course, we've had nearly 30 years more of conversational and prophetic information. Okay. And I read these things, and they were very rough translations, rough in the sense that they were translated by someone whose first language was German and who structured his sentences more like a German speaker. It was a little awkward. And it was fascinating nonetheless. It was slow reading because of that. A couple months, I'd gone through the 1,800 pages, put it under my bed, 1986. In 1988, I'm living in California, in Los Angeles, and I open a local paper. And I see something that says that there's a new discovery by Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories. And it's titled A-bomb testing tied to ozone damage, something like that. I went, oh, that's interesting. I start to read it, and before I finish it, I went, wait a minute. I already know this. How could I know this? This is a new discovery. And I'm sitting there kind of dumbstruck because I'm not psychic. I'm not working at Lawrence Livermore Labs. And then it was like the light bulb goes off. I reach under the bed, grab the first 100-page block, and I start going through, and it took me less than an actual minute to find the first mention of this whole ozone damage problem and the connection to A-bombs and radiation and other things. And I'm sitting there going, my gosh, they're talking about percentages that are very similar, considering that Lawrence Livermore has just published this 13 years, oh, no, let's see, 75. They published it, 13 years after this document, and they give a slightly higher percentage. That would make sense because the damage is increased. Here I'm sitting reading this stuff. Now, that's the first of a good number of these types of things from that body of 1,800 pages. The dimwit skeptics would like us to believe the following. Billy Meyer, living up in the rugged rural Zurich highlands, trying to survive, renovate a rundown farmhouse that when he took it over didn't have running water or electricity. I think it was missing some floors as well. This man who is working, even though he has a partial disability for the loss of his left arm, he works as a night watchman. He's raising 3 kids.
My gosh.
He goes on demand to when these extraterrestrials beckon him, day or night, and he gets on his moped with one hand, any weather. Off he goes with his camera most of the time for the photo ops, and he has these meetings. They tell him this stuff, and he transcribes it. Now, the internet babies that think that their birth is the result of a CD popping out of a C drive or something on their computers, the internet babies who sit at their computers like dolts simply searching, well, when was there the first idea of A-bomb testing? Oh, here, a professor somewhere in South Dakota had a theory right around the time Meyer published it. Uh-huh. And how did you find that information, genius? And by the way, that information wasn't online even going back to 2006 when we were searching this out. Well, he went and did an internet search, maybe 2011, 12, 13. He finds something. Oh, yeah. And so when was that document uploaded to the internet? How would Meyer have had access to it? Why would he been interested in searching out an obscure document on something that wasn't quite on the top of his own personal priority list in the realm of survival, etc.? Take 150 to 200 in the English language ones that we have translated so far, that we've corroborated, and you realize that these people that spend their time trying to tear down Meyer, they should be sent to their rooms. They shouldn't have any pointy objects near them, nothing that they can hurt themselves with. Use spoons when you feed them instead of plastic forks so they don't stick them in their foreheads by mistake or take an eye out. Because you see, they're so smart. They figure that in these 600 and so transcripts where Meyer has these long conversations which refer back many times to things spoken about in previous conversations. And let's remember that when he, in the 70s and even early 80s, is typing these out and then transcribing them, they're being printed, hand-printed, up until he gets a computer around 2000. They're hand-printed out, meaning they're typed and then they have not a Xerox, but a mimeograph machine type of a thing, which, of course, 60% of your audience won't know what that is. This was you crank it out by hand, and then these copies, which were all, of course, initially in German, are disseminated locally. People in other countries pick them up. Then the early English translations are done, and maybe a few get translated into other languages. Those translations found their way to me in Los Angeles. And they are available as early, in some cases, perhaps 1979. My gosh. So the dimwits who sit at their computers trying to tear down a man who works on behalf of humanity freely and, trying to save their sorry asses, pardon me, from destruction. Some of these people are in India, which is going to face a biological nuclear attack from China. 30 million people will be destroyed in the area of New Delhi, but they have time to sit and try and tear down the man who's trying to wake them up to become proactive and stop worrying about worshiping cows and get on with life here. So there's my dig, politically incorrect as it may be. The problem is you can't control every piece of paper, every contact report that was rolled off of a mimeograph machine, that was printed up, even run off on a Xerox in the 1900s and found its way to me and all the rest. You can't control it in English. You can't control it in German because they're already out there. But the geniuses would like us to believe that all Meyer had to do was wait long enough till something interesting came up and insert it. Never mind that these contacts often have whole stretches of dialogue, each sentence numbered, pertaining to this unique information. But rather than wake people up to the imminent destruction of everything they hold near and dear in their sorry lives, these indulged, spoiled, celebrity-seeking wannabes would prefer to tear somebody down who, by the way, they can't tear down.
Mike, you and I have to take a commercial break, my friend. But before we take the break, I have to ask you something, Mike.
Sure.
What do you really think about skeptics? Mike, stand by, buddy. Grab yourself another few things to bite. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. I love this guy. He's a good friend of mine. Michael Horn is our guest this hour. He is the authorized American media representative for Billy Meyer Contacts, which he has researched since 1979. Michael is the producer-director of the new Billy Meyer documentary, The Spiritual Teaching in Every Life, the writer, producer, director of the award-winning film, And Did They Listen?, as well as the co-producer of the new documentary, As the Time Fulfills, which presents an abundance of ironclad prophetically, I'm having a good time with this one, accurate scientific evidence that irrefutably authenticates the Billy Meyer case. www.theyfly.com, and Michael and I will be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Sometimes the brain wants to go one way and the mouth wants to go another way. By the way, Michael, I agree with everything you said when it comes to skeptics.
Oh, Rob, I tell you, it can be painful if you just don't laugh or something.
Just watch your blood pressure, my friend. We'll be back on the other side as we continue here in the X Zone with the one and only Michael Horn talking about the Billy Meyer prophecies. My name is Rob McConnell. Monday through Friday from 8 until midnight, I come to you right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. We'll be back. Don't go away.
Listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Wilda Wiecka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we will weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Wilda Wiecka, and the Science of Magic right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Jesus came back now and insisted that we listen to him. How would the world be different if Christians really followed the Gospels? For 2,000 years, we've been practicing a religion. Now it's finally time to get it right.
read Liberating Jesus, new from Roberta Grimes. Meet the Jesus you never knew. Roberta uses afterlife evidence and biblical analysis to prove that Jesus is exactly right. Learning the lessons that he came to teach is the reason we are born at all. Roberta says he has come back now to insist that we actually listen to him so we can begin to use his teachings to unite and transform the world. Liberating Jesus wherever books are sold. Jesus has the answers, and it's not too late. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Starr began to demonstrate a metaphysical connection to the spirit world as a little girl. Her family noticed the connection, but it was a great-grandmother who told the family that Linnea was indeed gifted. The great-grandmother, who was also gifted, felt that Linnea had indeed inherited these attributes. It has been noticed that oftentimes such things are passed down through the generations. Linnea was also born with a caul, a thin white membrane across a newborn's face. Legend has it that if the baby is born with this caul, the child will have second sight, or what we call psychic abilities. Linnea Starr does past, present, and future, and has the gift of prophecy. It is written within scriptures that if you were able to give factual information, and prophecies indeed come true, the gift indeed comes from the divine realm. Linnea Starr does large interactive groups as well as private gatherings. For more information on Linnea Starr or to contact Linnea for a one-on-one consultation, visit her website at www.linneastar.com. That's www.linneastar.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money in abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
Welcome back, everyone. Michael Horn is our special guest. We're talking this hour about the Billy Meyer prophecies, his website, www.theyfly.com. Mike, before we went to the break, you made a brief reference to China and India. And this is so pivotal, I believe, because China is seeming to raise its warhead. And does Billy get into what is presently happening between the United States and China with these man-made islands that China is claiming in the middle of international waters, and now the U.S. has sent a destroyer, or yesterday sent a destroyer, within 12 miles of these islands, and apparently they were warned off?
Information on this current situation from Meyer or from Figu. I can tell you that as far back as 1976, Meyer published information, actually in a kind of poetic form, about Russia and China coming together to destroy the West. Mainly, of course, referring to the U.S., but and how this danger was, going to come upon us. And already at that time, that there was a behind the scenes agenda. Now, I did a little video interview a couple months ago with a guy named Joe. It's on my YouTube channel. The title of the video is "You Need to Know Joe." It's almost a half hour long. Joe's a guy I met up here in Arizona who knew nothing about the Meyer case at all. And he booked me at a place. The first booking was to do my music one night because I decided to revive my music career, perform, sing, do whatever. And the other part of it was that when he looked me up to, see about me online, he found out I represented the Meyer case. He said, "You've got to present that here next week." So I said, okay. So that was the first of two presentations that he had me do. Now, again, he doesn't really know much about it except the topic caught his interest. Now, here's the kicker. Joe's a guy who was a master sergeant. He had been an infantryman, a sniper, an Army Ranger, and he ended up working in weapons development. And he had a security clearance higher than our president while he did that work. And he was telling me about things such as, by the way, working at one of the bases where they test the secret military craft. When people are seeing UFOs in the sky, over 90% is simply secret military. And he was telling me the same thing that Meyer had said years ago about this. But that wasn't the main part to refer to what you were talking about, China. He told me, he said, "You have to understand, we're already at war with China. This was several months ago. He's telling me, we've already had some confrontations with them in the North China Sea." And I said, "I never hear about it." He said, "No, you won't. Until something else happens, these things are kept out of the news." It turns out he was right. So in terms of the prophecies, it's like I mentioned, in my little dig at the genius who sits there trying to take Meyer down, that in the Enoch prophecies, I'll give it to you right off the prophecies from 1987, and China becomes dangerous, especially to India, as also at this time China maintains uneasy relations with her. China will attack India. And if biological weapons are used, around 30 million human beings will be killed in the area of and around New Delhi alone. However, this will not be the end yet, because the effect of biological bombs and missiles, etc., used cannot be controlled at that time, and terrible epidemics, unknown up to that point in time, will arise and will spread quickly to many areas. Nobody's thought much about that lately, probably except in some parts of the world where they don't want to think about it. So much of what Meyer has published decades ago, going back over 60 years, has either come true or is in the process right before our eyes of coming true. Nonetheless, these 10,000 monkeys sitting at keyboards, pounding away, trying to get something right, are trying to take it down. We got to take Meyer down. All that's really happening is they are delaying and forestalling, becoming conscious and aware of their own situations, accepting the responsibility to their fellow humans, starting even in their own countries, to start drawing their attention to it. Instead, they want to draw attention by saying, this is a hoax, this is all can't be true. Now, this information, as we were talking about the conversations, and I just read you a quote from what's called the Enoch prophecies. Meyer has written and published several documents that are specific, sentence after sentence, items of prophetic information. This one was from 87, and by the way, in this one, I'll read you, maybe you'll catch this line. The destruction of the WTC, i.e. the World Trade Center, by terrorists will only be the beginning. 1987, 14 years before
9/11.
that event occurred.
Yeah.
We have so much of this. And now, of course, people ask a question which I think is a legitimate question. And the answer is forthcoming. They say, well, do you have any copies of these original letters from 51, 58, 81, 88? No. You know, they've all gone the way of dust. They weren't done on computers. They were typed out, sent around. If they had a copy left in the course of years and decades, it probably, you know, met its fate somewhere. In a garbage bin, you know, to light a fire, who knows? So they said, well, then how can you prove that these things were published then? And I said, well, actually, it's simple if you realize that the Plejaren extraterrestrials and Meyer didn't really decide to hand everything to us on a silver platter so that we didn't have to do any thinking. Now, certainly, they could prove their existence in 5 minutes everywhere in the world. And they could have done that 70 years ago, too. Certainly, they could have copies on hand that you could find of all these documents that are so startling because everything's unfolding the way Meyer predicted specifically. But they didn't do that. Instead, you take a document such as this one, the Hanok prophecies, where, he's talking the World Trade Center, this must be a hoax. He must have published it after the fact, and blah, blah, blah. And all this stuff here. And then you go, well, wait a minute. There's some stuff in here that, It says here that, and it will be that the fanatics of Islam will rise up against the countries of Europe, and all will shake and quiver. Everything in the West will be destroyed. England will be conquered and thrown down to the lowest level of misery, and the fanatics and warriors of Islam will retain their power for a long, long time. Wait a minute. This document, we know, has been available in English since 2002. And in German, we know it was available before because it had to be translated. So put it even at 2000. When did we start to hear about fanatics of Islam rising up against the countries of Europe?
A couple of years ago.
When did that start to really take place?
Last year.
Yeah. And here's one. In addition, I mean, when I look at these, and then I know that these poor little guys sitting around trying to make a name for themselves by taking Meyer down. Here's number 237 in the Hanok prophecies. In addition, significant tensions will arise between the native citizens and immigrants from foreign countries who, as a rule, also observe religious beliefs different from those of the native populace. And in the end, this will lead to severe conflicts. Oh, really? Can you say Eastern Europe today? Everything, I mean, what does it take? We've got in here the predictions about the Russians. Oh my, this one I always tell people because it's so remarkable. You know, they foretell in here, I won't read every sentence, but they foretell that Russia is going to attack Scandinavia. They're going to do that before they attack my country and yours, by the way. And it says here, pertaining to an attack in Scandinavia, it must still be stated that the Russian attack will occur during the summer. In fact, starting from Arkhangelsk. Denmark will not be dragged into the war due to the insignificance of the country. Now, here's a way you prove this document again. Let's say that this was in English and online 2004, 2006, 2008, who cares? In 2011, the Russians moved their troops to Arkhangelsk, the specific city of all the places in the world and in Russia. Meyer names it, and they move their troops there. It's a perfect staging area. That information alone changed the mind of a guy I've known for 50 years, retired physician, physicist, major skeptic, highly religious, told me I was nuts to be involved with this material. I sent him this information. Shortly after the Russians moved their troops, he had me come over, film his interview where he said, hold on, this Meyer's the real deal here, basically. So it's only the young know-it-alls who think that the world begins and ends when they turn their computer on, that don't have the common sense, the experience. They have no respect for the concept of circumstances. Who's the man? Where does he live? When did this happen? What were his resources? What were the means, the motive, and the opportunity for him to do any of this, let alone setting the precedent with UFO photos, UFO films, UFO video, UFO metal samples, UFO sound recordings, seven-fingered handprints, prophetic information up the wazoo, precedent setting in half a dozen different areas of evidence. Why are we so much in trouble in this world? Because these people that come to attack, they think that they're the educated ones.
Why did the visitors, the ETs, select Billy? And what do they want him to do with these prophecies?
Sure. Well, I have to always say with things like that, according to the information in the case. Because
fair enough.
There's things that I can say I can prove or anybody can prove if they do the due diligence. We can't prove the following, and here's what they said. First, reincarnation is a fact of life, they claim. We don't know that. We either believe it or we don't, right?
Right.
Now, they say that there's something called the human spirit, which is different from what we usually refer to as the soul, which they say is really, what we mean by that is the psyche, it's the emotional center of the body, our personalities are connected to that, but it's temporal. Upon death, the psyche, soul, personality, all this stuff dissolves. And the information gained from the lifetime is retained in what are called storage banks and also absorbed by the spirit, which moves into what they call the beyond, a kind of etheric realm. Now, they claim that the human spirit reincarnates. Everybody who is living has had numerous lifetimes before of all sorts, the good, the bad, the ugly, victor, victim, murderer, lover, etc. Meyer is said to be the current incarnation, the current personality of the oldest spirit form incarnate in the universe that has a special mission because it had evolved so far prior, literally billions of years ago. That's why I say this is, according to information in the case, speculative. That spirit form had lots of history in its incarnations as a human being, and when it came back into the reincarnation cycle and in the human personalities, it inhabited and enlivened the bodies of Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, the prophet Emmanuel, whose name was changed to Jesus Christ, the prophet Muhammad, and the seventh and final prophet would be the most unlikely, pot-bellied, gray-bearded, one-armed Swiss farmer, quote-unquote, Billy Meyer.
I thought you were going to say Santa Claus there for a second.
Just about.
Yeah.
He's got that look. And he's, a convivial person, too. He's a sweet man. So what we're told is that this is the seventh and final prophet for Earth, as is the case with all really true prophets and true, people who really forged the way even in, let's say, less earth-shattering but equally important in certain categories. They break the sciences, Galileo, this, that, and these people are never well received in their lifetimes. They are attacked, vilified, crucified, shot at, whatever you've got. So Meyer knew that, he had a choice because he could, he comes into this life as unknowing as all of us, but simply he had a spirit form, they use that term, and consciousness and stored information that was monumentally vast. And if under the right tutelage it was developed, which is what the Pleiaren did, he could always back out of, become the prophet for the time and bring forward the spiritual teaching, the prophecies, which are intended to help us assure our future survival. Apparently that didn't work again. So, and I'll just throw in something because it does pertain to your country. In November of last year, I published it with the Pleiaren's encouragement, asked that we call on a petition. We put it together that there needs to be a true international armed force of over 300,000 to put down the IS, the Islamic State, or ISIS, as it's ISIL, or the world risks being thrown back into the Dark Ages. Remember, in here we just read about, radical Islam sweeping through Europe and the rest of it. And I did hear that your new prime minister wants to, distance himself from any of that. And I think at the same time take in 26,000 Syrian refugees or something. And I think we'll be doing the same thing in this country. Basically, if our countries follow suit, we will follow the suicidal suit of what Merkel has forced upon Europe. And Meyer in the Play Iron said, this woman is a lunatic, and she's doing the bidding of the U.S. and the EU and provoking Russia. There could be another world war. We are out in those times. So it goes far beyond anything to do with ETs and UFOs, because that will fade away from our screen of awareness and our priorities as these events occur. And the environmental events are going to increase exponentially from here on. You just saw a 200-mile-per-hour hurricane. There will be upheavals in forms of earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, other forms of storms, etc. This is what they've tried to warn us about, but we knew better.
Well, let's see. We've had that super hurricane. There was a massive earthquake in Asia this week. Our new prime minister is taking 25,000 Syrians, which I totally disagree with.
It's insane.
It is. It is. Instead of taking all these immigrants, what they should have done is fought the fight, put the immigrants back in that country.
Yes.
Like right now, it's going to cause chaos. And you're right. The tension because of the religious differences and the sociological differences are mounting. Here in Canada, you're not supposed to say Merry Christmas anymore because of its religious connotations.
See, these are the people that have sold out the countries,
Exactly.
The ones who are doing this deliberately. And here's another thing about it. A lot of these people, and you'll notice that they're predominantly men. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's some women, but this is predominantly young, middle-aged men coming into these countries with the religious beliefs that they were fleeing from in their own countries, will now bring them into the West and insist upon all sorts of accommodations for them.
Nobody asked me if I wanted to be politically correct, because if they asked me, I would have said, no way.
Of course not. And it doesn't matter. It's just like, long ago the Play Iron said the way to do it, they said illegal immigration creates strife. Yeah. It creates civil wars. It creates famines. It creates crime. And it's not about that everybody that comes from another country is a bad person. You just totally imbalance the home, country. Yeah. And the people that come in can only exploit more than they can contribute because they're not at the same level with language, ability, all the rest. It's common sense. But the governments, the people that work their way into the head of these governments, these people are dedicated to selling out their countries. Mm-hmm. We have Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook making a 26-minute presentation in Chinese. How charming. It's great. And it's wonderful he learned it. Mm-hmm. But going back to the Clinton era, we've been selling out our country to the Chinese, nuclear secrets era. It goes on and on, Rob. This is the real world stuff that people want to escape from and they can't. This is what Meyer's been warning us
Mikey,
about.
You and I have to say so long for now, but listen to this. The Canadian government under Prime Minister Harper made a deal with China that they own the Alberta tar sands. Plus, listen to this. Okay, this is a 30-year trade pact that the Prime Minister made. They are going to be bringing over Chinese milk into Canada as part of a trade agreement. What the hell is going to happen with the Canadian farming and dairy industry?
They don't care.
It is so wrong. Mike, you and I have to say so long, my good friend. Always a great pleasure talking to you, Mike. Thank you so much for bringing the Billy Meyer prophecies to the world. I appreciate you, Mike.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Take care of yourself, buddy. Exo Nation, my guest this hour has been my good friend Michael Horn. His website, www.theyfly.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Speaking about Michael Horn, notice the segue. Michael and Stanton Friedman are going to be back with us on Wednesday, November the 11th. as we have a return to the Billy Meyer debate from 8 p.m. until 10 p.m. right here from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, and around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network. I'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.